Hi, and you're very welcome to the latest Ireland Thinks Sunday Independent poll. This is the poll for April. I'm Gabia Gatavitsketa, political correspondent. I'm joined by top pollster Kevin Cunningham, who this time is going to take us through the state of the parties and what the support is for the Dáil political parties across the board.
Thanks, Gabia. So, in this particular poll, we have Fianna Fáil on 25%. That's up 3 since last month. Fine Gael are on 21, that's down 1. Sinn Féin, 21, they're remaining the same. The Social Democrats are up 1 to 8%. Ain 2 also up 1 to 4%. Independent Ireland down 1. Similarly, Independents and Others are down 2. So that's Independent Ireland on 4, Independents and Others on 9. And then of the smaller parties, you've got the Labour Party on 4 as they were last time, the Green Party on 2 also as they were last time, and People Before Profit Solidarity on 3, which is up 1. So I guess in some respect this seems to be a little bit like a rally around the flag effect, a sort of a small bounce for Fianna Fáil. Some gains for Fine Gael, I've noticed, at the expense of independents, in terms of when I was looking at the crosstabs of how people said they were voting last time and how people say they're voting this time. But Fianna Fáil seem to have gained a lot at the expense of Fine Gael, which means that Fine Gael figures overall quite down. So what do you make of this?
Yeah, so looking at your poll, I mean, very much so Fianna Fáil bounce. And if I could just allude to the support for party leaders, Micheál Martin, he's a Taoiseach, he's on 49 points there. He's up 3. He's been the popular leader now for quite some time. Salmon Harris, no change on 43, he's number 2, followed by Holly Cairns, who of course we know is the leader of the Social Democrats. She's still on maternity leave. I think she's going to come back in the summertime. But there is a story here, I think, with the Fianna Fáil bounce to some
Yeah.
extent. I mean, the support for Fianna Fáil, really very much so continuing what we saw in the general election. And interestingly, Fianna Fáil ministers and TDs first ones to come out and say, well, the polls are all wrong. But in fairness, the poll is echoing what we saw in last November's election. I'm sure you'll agree you haven't changed your polling methods.
No, I know. There's no change in the methods, of course, but yeah, no, you're right. It is interesting. Fianna Fáil, 25%. That's the highest they've been in this series since you'd have to go all the way back to January 2020 to find a similar figure. They're on 27% back then. I think it's probably reflective of maybe the environment with the tariffs. I guess a lot of people focusing on the government. Micheál Martin, I think, was perceived to have performed relatively well in his interactions with Donald Trump in the White House. And I think there's very much a focus on the government's response to this immediate threat.
Yeah, he's very successful at putting across the statesman's like image, if you will. The other thing that I want to point attention to is, Fine Gael are kind of stagnant. Like, it is difficult. I mean, the issue for Fianna Fáil is obviously you're on top of the polls. The difficulty is staying on top. That's going to be the challenge for any party. But, there's gap potentially for a third grouping. And obviously we have the independents are in power. Social Democrats, Labour didn't really get very far when it came to programme for government negotiations. I mean, Social Democrats are up by 1, Labour sort of stagnant to 4%. They'll really want to see the support rising. If they're serious about going into government, if they're serious about being that third grouping, independents and others are down slightly. Independent Ireland down by 1 as well. A bit of a dip in support there, but certainly I would think that they'll want to, especially the Soc Dems and Labour, like if they're serious about being that third grouping with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they'll have to try and shore up a bit of that support.
The Soc Dems are interesting. I was asked previously, how are the Social Democrats up so much? And I think part of it was their figure in the actual general election was slightly deflated by the fact that they didn't run in as many constituencies. So they had in effect 0 in half of the country. So their natural kind of brand is actually much stronger than they were getting in that election. Obviously, as you said, independents and others down quite considerably in this poll, as they have been in the last couple of polls, which brings us to the Dáil shenanigans.
Yes, the speaking row that's, I think, finally over, perhaps fingers crossed. It's been a long running row ever since the new government was formed. This is the question you've actually asked. I think this is the third poll. You might correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Do you think Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael should be dealing with independent TD Michael Lowry? 67% are now saying no, and that's 5 percentage points higher. Only 21% saying yes, and that's dipped. So they don't support doing the business, and they haven't supported previously, but they are backing Ceann Comhairle Verona Murphy. They're saying that she was not. I suppose the jury's kind of out on that one. The question was, do you think that she acted fairly and appropriately in her handling of the dispute? 42% saying yes, 43% saying no. Like, it's very close there.
Yeah, it's quite marginal with her. I'm just coming to your first figure as well. That only 21% backing the dealing with independent TD Michael Lowry. That 21%, if you think about it, in this same poll, 46% or so are actually supporting Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and only 21% are saying that they should be dealing. So quite a lot of the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael voters, if not most of them, do not agree with them doing this deal with Michael Lowry, I guess. So that's that. I mean, that's kind of been a consistent thing, but it's quite interesting. The other figure you were going to come to, I think, was about the opposition and what you think is most appropriate at this point. The opposition should move on. 57% saying that, and 35% saying the opposition should continue with their objections. So most people seem to believe the opposition should move on, while at the same time, when asked who's to blame or what side people stand on, people are more likely to stand on the side of the opposition. 51% saying, when it comes to the debacle, whose side do they stand on? 51% say the opposition parties and 31% say the government. Now, there is a bit of a shift there. The opposition are down 8 points in that regard, but yeah, this is quite interesting. People seem to back the opposition, but actually want them to move on.
Yeah, I think they back the opposition. They probably don't want Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael necessarily to be seen to be doing business with Michael Lowry, but they're saying, look, lads, you've made your point, and let's all move on to more important issues such as housing, for example. That old crisis still ticking away as we speak about tariffs, and the media's quite dominated what's happening in Trump's White House. Certainly this debacle over whether or not the public were misled on housing completions before the election, 64% believe yes. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael misled the public. Interestingly, we have a few questions as well on the taxes that first-time buyers pay when they're buying their homes, which often can almost be like unexpected costs that you perhaps maybe not have been prepared for. The stamp duty, of course, is one. Should the government scrap the stamp duty for first-time buyers trying to buy a home? 76% saying yes. And then should the government scrap local property tax for first-time buyers for the first year? Also 75% there saying yes. That's a couple of €100 usually works out as, depending on the value of your home. The government did sort of move to more or less freeze local property taxes. Cabinet last week. They will be going up slightly, but I think most households won't be moving between the different bands. But of course, anything to make it life easier for first-time buyers is always going to be support for that, isn't there?
Yeah, no, I think there is, and it's a persistent thing in Irish politics, certainly, notwithstanding the relative support for the government, that there is, housing is still on our list, kind of the number one issue. And certainly, again, this figure about the number of people who believe that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael misled the public on the housing numbers, that's still very dominant there as well. So there's still this dissatisfaction, obviously amongst the opposition, but even within the government side when it comes to this particular issue. But maybe it's just priced into the vote, and maybe that's where it's going to sit, I guess.
My thanks to Kevin Cunningham for his analysis. For the full details and all of the questions in this month's Sunday Independent Ireland Thinks poll, including what the public think about Conor McGregor and his bid for the Áras, you can read about it on Sunday Independent and the Irish Independent.